Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
Our conversation begins.
The lonely guy is over. So I guess let's jump off a bridge.
I'm here. I'm never gonna leave you.
Now, the tender, heartbreaking story of a man doomed to go to bed with his bed.
First time lonely guy?
He didn't know it,
How many in your body?
I'm alone.
but he was a lonely guy. And he wasn't alone.
Iris, where are you? Marilyn!
They were everywhere.
Marilyn, my love! Where are you, boy?
He tried his best to meet women. Working women.
First National Bank.
Hi, Carol Zoll, please.
I'm sorry, she's all tied up right now.
Pretty women.
You want to go to dinner?
I'm a man.
Anything was better than sleeping alone. But he was still lonely. So lonely that he wrote about it. And then things began to change.
Nothing like some 80s suicide humor, eh, Andy?
You know what this movie felt like? It felt it felt like an early celebration of incel light. It's a very odd movie. Because I was like, this like the Lonely Guy store.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is totally like a light comedy version of the insanity of incels.
That's exactly what it is. And it's really uncomfortable. It makes for a very uncomfortable experience because I'm just so out of touch with that, like intentionally out of touch with that entire sort of worldview. I struggle with it. I struggle with the media representation of it. And here I am watching a Steve Martin depressed comedy about it. Oh, woe begone. Those are the days. This was a dramatic re-ranking for me. How this was your first viewing?
It was my first viewing of this. Yes, I had not seen it before. It's funny. I had heard of it, and I think if I had looked at the poster or the cover,
which is terrible,
I would continually have said, "No, I don't need to watch that one," based on the image alone, because it's so bad.
Meh.
Yeah. Steve Martin riding a bike with his dog and a girl pretending to chase him. I don't know.
Yeah, what is that? She is clearly about to pivot in a different direction. That's what we're about to see. I feel like, I was talking to some folks about this movie before I watched it again, and I was trying to explain it, and I was explaining it in thus, that this was the mid-'80s, and this is when Steve Martin kind of figured out who he was, and it was, I felt pretty good going into the movie because my memory of it was that this was his kind of sad sack entree to sad sack comedy, where he is the guy who's sort of inflicted upon, and he's super charming. And the peak of this sort of sad sack comedy is, for my money, Father of the Bride, where he's just inflicted upon. Everybody is doing. He's just trying to get through the process. It's hard, and he's just trying to get through the process, and it's funny, and some of it's awkward, and there are people who make fun of him, and that's kind of what The Lonely Guy is. It was his first chance to do that, and my memory of it was very positive. And this was the longest movie experience I've had in recent memory, and I just watched The Irishman. This movie took forever to get through because it was uncomfortable and just not that kind of sweet, sad sack humor that I remembered. It just, every joke was flat for me.
I think my reaction to it was a little better than yours. But I feel like it was because it had been tempered by having heard from people about exactly what you just described. And having heard that, I'm like, okay, I know going into this, it's going to be that. And I ended up, from my reaction, finding a little more humor in it. And I still have a lot of issues with it, and I don't think it's necessarily a film I would return to. But I think there were some interesting ideas and some interesting moments and stuff that I don't know if saying that they worked is the right thing, but I think that they were interesting experiments, I guess we'll just say.
Here's a silver lining. That we don't have to change our very first topic, and that is, will the next Steve Martin movie we watch involve a guy looking for sex? Check that box. Steve Martin is still looking to have sex.
5 out of 5 so far. Holy cow.
Yeah. He is weirdly less offensive in the Hunting than he is in other movies.
I think so, because I mean, he starts in a relationship that's not working. And
that's weird.
Yeah. And then he kind of is in a place where he's on the hunt, but not in a pervy sort of way. He's on the hunt in a way that's like, I was just, I'm a brokenhearted, lonely person now. And he's not quite ready for the dating scene, but still he's kind of looking, So it's not like just a pervy college sort of attitude. I think there's a little more meat to what he's looking for now.
He is, and he starts out, I think authentic to who he becomes, right? He starts out in this sort of fantasy experience where he's this greeting card writer, and he just discovers the landmark pivot for the industry. Let's make greeting cards for pets, and the good Lord, the voiceover, Andy, it's still here, and he's telling the story of how great he is, only to get home and discover that in fact his live-in girlfriend he's the live-in boyfriend in her apartment, is already in bed with a dancer named Juan, and he just climbs into bed with the two of them and have a very awkward conversation. Is this, if you take the first 15 minutes of this movie as a mile marker for Steve Martin in his career, is this a satisfying way to sort of encapsulate his career so far? For you?
Definitely not the first 15 minutes. No. This is not a film.
Wait, it gets better?
This is not a film that starts well. No, it's a rough start for this film. I think that the reason that there are moments of this film that ended up working for me is largely because I do end up liking some of the relationship that he ends up forming later in the film. Well, a couple relationships. I like Charles Grodin. I think he's a great guy. And he's a guy that plays a sad sack really well. I don't know if that's a compliment or what, but it's true. And then Judith Ivey as Iris. I think that there's an interesting relationship that they end up having. I kind of enjoy. So I do like those relationships. And I think I end up finding it easier to tolerate some of this kind of nonsense that we have in the film and the way that the comedy plays, because I end up liking some of the characters a little more in the relationships that they have.
This, I think, is the central challenge of the film, Andy. And that's why I open up with these first 15 minutes, because I think it sets the bar for the expectation of the movie. And then everyone that comes into his life after the opening of the movie is a more interesting character for me here. And I think that may go credit to Neil Simon, maybe to Arthur Hiller, but these sort of participant characters, these B characters, are, Charles Grodin, for me, is a better sad sack than Steve Martin, right? He is funnier, he is more believable in the role, and far more intriguing. Every time he leaves the room with a fern, I am interested to follow him and see where he goes. And so I find it sort of frustrating that, I'm going to hang out with Steve Martin's more. Okay, that's fine. Let's see where it goes. And same thing with the relationships. And I think this is a maybe a separate conversation when you look at these relationships. But the chase, right? The sort of sliding doors, missed opportunities angle where he's continuously losing her number. Is that a rewarding chase, or would you rather just see, learn more about her and her 5 ex-husbands? Like she's, I think Judith Ivey is also fantastic and funny. It is, to my eye, the movie breaks down because of all of their relationships with our protagonist. And I don't know if that's a problem of this sort of lightweight book, the Lonely Guy's Guide to Life, or whatever they call it, Lonely Guy's Book of Life by Bruce J. Friedman, or if it's suffering through the adaptation process or just rushing to get it produced. Whatever the case, it's actually Martin in this movie that makes it worse.
Interesting. I didn't feel that. I kind of, I don't know. I liked some of the elements of him with these people. Like, I loved the stuff with him constantly losing Iris's phone number. I liked the way that played out. And it worked for me watching him hang out with Grodin or hang out by himself and trying to adapt to this lonely guy lifestyle where you have to go shop in the lonely guy store and buy things. So it was like absurd comedy in a way where sometimes it worked. And I don't know, the fact that Neil Simon did the adaptation, I was a little confused because there was an adaptation by Neil Simon of Bruce J. Friedman's book, and then Ed Weinberger and Stan Daniels wrote the screenplay of the adaptation, I guess.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure how that works. because it feels like the adaptation would have been the screenplay, but maybe it's because this book is one of those books that's like whatever it is, the Iris book that adaptation was adapted from, that really isn't
right.
a narrative piece, but is more just like, if you're lonely, try this, and maybe that's how the book is. Neil Simon took that, adapted it into an actual story about a lonely guy, and then these guys wrote the screenplay. That's my best guess, because I've tried finding some information about the book, but haven't been able to find much.
It is this rags to riches story that comes out of it, right? This story of this guy who, has no relationship, and he is, Cinderella without a prince sort of a thing. And then he gets famous and has lots of meaningless relationships, sort of one after the other, and he makes some money, and he's suddenly a popular guy. But it turns out that his, it was the original relationship that was going to be the best one, and the money doesn't matter, and she's got her own fair share of anxieties and frustrations and fears. And I do like the premise of their relationship, and I love that they made her not weak but goofy, to sort of match his patterns of goofiness and actually make it so that he can fill a role in her life, right? That she comes with this bucket load of divorces, and she's afraid to go to the bathroom by herself in a restaurant because that's how one of her husbands leaves her. When she turns her back, he's gone, so they end up going into the bathroom together. There are some really cute moments, and so I think this one, like the last one, is a movie that I should say, like a lot of the movies in the Steve Martin series so far, they're movies I'm kind of rooting for. That I want some more substance to it, but I still struggle. Well, even with Lonnie Anderson.
Even with Lonnie Anderson. Even with Merv Griffin again.
Merv Griffin.
Or Dr. Joyce Brothers.
Oh,
What
Andy. Okay, since you brought up Joyce Brothers, is that the ultimate dated punchline?
It worked. It is dated. Definitely. I mean, this is one of those films that is taking very current elements and putting them into a film. And if you don't know who Dr. Joyce Brothers is, I mean, yeah, I don't know. To a certain extent, it doesn't matter because you meet her on a TV show. She's one of the guests on the show, on the couch with him. And then we see her. So she's somebody famous, even if you don't know who she is. And then at the very end, you see that now Charles Grodin is with her. So I guess it could still play to a certain extent, but it works so much better when you know who she is.
It does. And I think it was even maybe, I don't know, was it dated for 1980 for me?
Yeah.
In 84. I didn't see it in 84, I'm sure. But I just wondered, by the time I saw it, I was like, was I thinking about who Joyce? Probably. I probably knew exactly who Joyce Brothers was. But she is an amazing person, right? As a psychologist and an advice columnist. I mean, she has been a personality for a long time. And this is an interesting little bit of trivia that I did not know. In 1955, Dr. Joyce Brothers became the only woman to win the top prize on the American game show, the $64,000 question, answering questions on the topic of boxing, which was suggested as a stunt by the show's producers.
Really?
So, yeah. So you go, Joyce Brothers. That is fantastic. So I'm, she passed away in 2013. So I just felt like at the end, when Grodin ends up with Joyce Brothers, it is it's a tough joke to end the movie on because she's such a specific personality, has such a specific sort of celebrity to a field, and I don't think the joke was set up that well on the TV show with Merv. I just don't think it was set up enough or meaningful enough to make for a great joke at the end, and so that's where I struck.
I'll tell you where it made for a great joke. When you see him on the show with the twins,
yeah,
the Schneider
twins,
and Joyce Brothers, and then it cuts to him in bed, and you see him with one of the twins, and it pulls out, and you see him with both of the twins, and it pulls out, and you see him with both of the twins and Joyce Brothers.
You know what, Andy? You are right. That is the payoff of the joke. You're right. I get it. And in fact, I think I have been corrected now, because in fact, Grodin ending up with her is not the payoff of the introduction of her on the show. It's the payoff of her being in bed with the twins and and Larry. Right. That's the setup for the joke at the end. I have been convinced, Andy. Well done.
That made me laugh out loud. That was just a great, and it was so easy. It was such an easy comedy beat, but they pulled it off so beautifully. I had a good old chuckle with that one.
How hard were you laughing? And I mean laughing out loud at the old suicide bridge, watching the bodies fall in front of the camera. Is this hit home?
Oh, I don't know. It's a really awkward thing to kind of use as a comedy kind of area for this whole, several parts of the film. Every time somebody's depressed, one of these lonely guys, they all go here. It's weird. There's the rooftops where they all go and call out to their lost loves. And then there's the bridge where they get really depressed, always when it's foggy, so they can throw themselves off it into the waters below.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing to make funny, sadly. It's one of those things where it kind of worked for me because it ties into the loneliness. And, unfortunately, people go dark places when they get really lonely. So I don't know. I didn't hate it, but it was awkward.
The gallows humor bit, I think, is, it's fine. I struggle with it because I think I just didn't find it that funny, and I think that's just that that joke wasn't made for me and who I am right now. I think seeing this the first time in the 80s, 90s, whenever, I probably laughed a lot.
Yeah,
I was the guy who thought that was funny. I didn't.
Well,
really
it's one of those things. It depends on your mind, your frame of mind. It depends on what's going on in your life. I mean, it depends on a lot of things to find stuff like that humorous. And it's a rougher thing. It's a tricky thing to make work well. And it's, I'm a little torn. Obviously, I think it was probably rougher for most people.
I think Grodin actually sets it up pretty well. And the way he sort of laments how he's, I'm up here, I'm down there. So I go back and forth. Yeah. He sells it comedically, and I think he has a unique gift for selling something quite so gallows in a way that allows all of us to, or many of us, to approach it humorously. It gets a little bit overkill for me at the end, frankly, where I can still laugh at it in the beginning, but by the end, when the bodies are like really just sort of plummeting right in front of the camera, it's less funny, and it's more just like you've oversold the gag.
Yeah.
Just
as a side note, returning to the Lonely Guy's Book of Life, the book, I did find online the information about this book. So let me share that with you.
Oh, please do.
If you're a lonely guy, says author Bruce J. Friedman, take heart. There are millions of people just like you out there. Unfortunately, your chances of meeting any of the really attractive ones are slim. The Lonely Guy's Book of Life is Friedman's classic manual on handling undesired solitude. Some of his tips, and remember, a woman also can be a lonely guy. Your apartment. The worst view you can have is of a bridge, particularly a Lost Horizon type that's obscured in fog at the far end. In no time at all, the lonely guy will start thinking of it as a metaphor for his life, stretching off into nowhere. Plants. Buy a lot of them. Scattered about, they will cover up the fact that you don't have enough furniture and aren't knowledgeable about room dividers. A drawback is that each day you will see little buds and shoots, life perpetuating itself while yours may very well not be. Cooking. Forget about measuring things. Just tear off hunks of things and toss them in. Lonely guys are too upset to be dealing with 1.5 teaspoons of nutmeg, which they won't have around anyway. Dating. An effective strategy is to schedule periodontal work on a Friday afternoon. This will keep you desperately uncomfortable until late Saturday night. At that point, you can say to yourself, no sense calling anyone now. I might as well get the Sunday papers and pack it in. Simple as that. You'll be out of the woods and you'll have tough gums too. Friedman's experiences after the Book of Life was published in 1978 would bring hope to any lonely guy. I was living alone when I wrote it and I feel the pain, he says. I guess that's not on the back. This is just an extra little quote. But the second I finished it, literally, I went out and met my current wife. Now I'm here with a new wife, with a new baby, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and God knows what else, and I crave a little loneliness. There you go.
Huh. Weird. That was a weird turn at the end.
Yes. Right.
God, I wish everything I wanted. It turns out I didn't. I need a fern. I have a little, right. I have a little follow-up too, and this is more about Joyce Brothers, because it turns out Joyce Brothers? Uh-huh. What? So I'm sitting here. I just read you that thing about the $64,000 question.
Yeah.
$64,000 question. Andy, does that ring any sort of bell to you?
The $64,000 question, should it ring a bell to me? I don't know. Why?
It was, Andy, a quiz show. And it was only a few years later that Charles Van Doren showed up on the quiz show 21, and there were all the claims about the quiz shows being rigged, and Brothers was all tied up in that, swearing up and down that she had not cheated or been given any answers. And I was just checking to see if she was actually represented in the movie Quiz Show, which was a fantastic movie. I can't believe that hasn't surfaced in our catalog yet. She was not. Don't worry about it. But wow, we need to do Quiz Show. See what I did there? Yes. I came right back around. All right.
You know, I will just say Dr. Joyce Brothers, she was in movies from 72 through 2002 as herself, like almost always as herself. So even if you didn't recognize her from the film, you may have recognized her from many of her other movies cameos. Clearly, she had fun being in films and TV projects, and a lot of them were kind of the goofier sorts of things, like The Naked Gun, like True Beverly Hills, Married with Children, Loaded Weapon, Spy Hard.
She became like the slapstick punchline because of her career and the kinds of stuff she wrote about. Like, she was sort of the default slapstick punchline. I'll bet you could have made any sort of bawdy joke at a party, and the punchline could have been Dr. Joyce Brothers did, and it would have been funny to 90% of the people there. So anyhow, she's got a long and storied career.
Yes, indeed.
And don't forget her hit book, What Every Woman Should Know About Men. So there you go. Lonnie Anderson.
She pops up in here too.
Also had a storied career.
Yes. And that was a funny bit to have her pop up.
Yes.
Yeah. That worked. See, there are things in here that do work.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're right. I agree. And again, I think I stand by my premise that there are many things in here that do work. And the challenge for me in almost all of them is Steve Martin, even though I would say in the defense of Steve Martin that you can tell he's on the journey to the everyman kind of sad sack comedy genius that I feel like he ends up being. And I do like that effort. Right? It's much less of a character piece than the movies that we've seen very recently, right? It's much less of a like him taking on
when you say a character piece, you mean like playing a big broad character.
Exactly.
Not a character piece like exploration of a human being character piece.
Absolutely true. I mean, more of a stereotype.
Yeah.
Kind of, he's putting on a big role. And even the big comedic role, like the jerk, like we don't have him doing that. I feel like we get to see through and maybe get a sense of who he is and a sense of his range. And so that's a very positive thing. It's a very positive thing.
That's a good point, because this really is the first chance we get of seeing him playing in a comedy where it's just a very straight character that he's playing. So that is a nice, so I mean, to that point, all of the films that we have seen Steve Martin kind of in so far early in his career, each are doing something a little different. And so it's clear that he is taking a pretty measured path as far as what he's choosing so that he can do a variety of different things in each of the films.
Right. This is the first one where we don't get an affectation.
Yeah.
And in this case, the film, the affectation role is actually played by, Charles Grodin. He gets the kind of the big broad thing, even if he's playing kind of whipped introvert
Yeah.
sort of character. So I actually think that's very positive. That's a good thing.
What did you think about the dog?
My kids came in and sat down at that bit at the, when he's on a boat. What should we just say as a parenthetical? How crazy is it that all of our central characters end up on a cruise at the same time on the same boat?
It's a broad, absurd comedy. Of course,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen.
It's fine. It's fine. It's all fine. But also a dog, and so I think the dog bit was funny. I think that the steward or whoever it was who brought the dog around, saying, "Hey, this dog came on with this note attached to it," and a stick in his mouth, right? And when you see the stick, something's going to happen to the stick, and boy, did my kids yell at the TV when he throws a stick and the dog jumps off and there is no effort to rescue the dog. Knowing what kind of movie this is, you could sort of read the tea leaves that something's going to happen with the dog later. That will pay off. But it was very frustrating for the younger viewers who did not catch that. Yeah.
You need to, it's one of those ones where it works because the way that they've built the relationship with the dog.
The stick is the Joyce Brothers of the dog gag. Right. If you'd seen all 70 other movies that she was in, all of the stick dog jokes, they would make more sense. So I actually thought the dog was funny. I thought that was a fun bit of dopey slapstick that worked for me. You agree? I assume?
It was. Yeah, it very much was. And, there were bits like in the Jimmy Carter gag that, I don't think it worked quite as well, but still, it was kind of funny that he's one of the guys who's in the crowd because he's a lonely guy.
That is that ended up being an interesting and I think an ultimately out of touch political statement in that bit of humor. I don't know what I think what they were making a gag about, his presidency, right? You don't put him in there without having that sort of sense. We're going to have fun with this kind of dopey guy because he so fit the mantle. But now watching this thing,
this is like knee deep in the first of Reagan's presidencies.
Exactly, right. And now what we have learned watching this movie decades later is that Jimmy Carter has had an extraordinary and storied career, and he is an incredible humanitarian. Like he has actually, lived up to, far more than the cloth of his presidency ever did, and the challenges that he had at office. And so I found that really funny. Like, oh, that's a joke that didn't land, thanks to the annals of history. So
right. But you can appreciate it for the time because clearly there were thoughts about Jimmy Carter and his presidency back then.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And we're making, that's the equivalent of us making, I would say, probably Clinton jokes at this point, and writing, Clinton Oval Office jokes. And
I think it would, if it was that recent, it would be Obama jokes.
Well, you think Obama would be ours?
Well, I'm just saying, if timing wise, because Carter was president right before Reagan, and this was 84, so it's just the president right before.
I'm just saying that, like,
you're just saying Obama's not funny.
No, Obama's hysterical, man. Don't you go there. That dude can joke.
He knows how to drop a mic.
He knows how to drop a mic. But I'm just saying, in terms of our generational connection to a president that we make fun of, I think for us as Gen Xers, that is Clinton. And and I would say probably
would Bush also.
Neil Simon and you're right. Bush is easy money.
There's a whole movie about how easy it is to make fun of him.
And I really look forward to the movies that the stone cold slapstick comedies to come from the millennials. If anyone is capable of doing it, please rescue us. Okay, so that's Carter. Where do you go from Carter?
I have a strange little rabbit hole that I went down.
Oh, tell me.
Well, because he calls the number, and it's a phone number with a letter in it still. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, that's weird. This is the 80s. I thought that was done with. And so I started kind of doing some digging about old phone numbers and letters and everything, trying to figure out, what the heck. And from what I can tell is that the practice should have ended, according to everything that I've read, is it pretty much ended in the 60s to have letters in your phone numbers. So nobody would have been doing that still. But I also did find, which was an odd thing to discover, there were people who were very resistant to changing phone numbers because they loved the literary charm of the old telephone exchange names. And there were groups like the Anti-Digit Dialing League and the Committee of 10 Million to Oppose All Number Calling.
What?
These groups formed just to protest the switch to all number calls.
Wow.
Isn't that strange that there were people who were just so adamant about it? I guess it's not, because that's the nature of people, to be so attached to something that they won't let it go. And so if the internet was around, we would all have been seeing posts about this over and over about, I'm not letting go of my letters in my phone number.
Wow.
Did you belong, or did your parents belong to the Committee of 10 Million to Oppose All Number Dialing?
They did not. No, my parents, are you kidding? My dad had like the first briefcase cell phone, like mobile phone. He was always on the cut. Like if he would have, he was a cord cutter before there were cords to cut. He was so into it. And so I never had that. I remember, Murray Hill 59975. Like
Right.
I just remember it. I remember it from TV shows. I know that it has to do with these exchanges that have limits to the number of subscribers that they can have in any particular geographic region. I know that it has to do with mnemonics, like what the letters and words end up being. I don't know the history of dialing well enough to say it. It is quaint. And I think it's really funny that they still have it. And not only do they still have it, I think they still had it. It was like, there are some bumper stickers, right? That go by. I feel like I noticed bumper stickers that actually had numbers on them that were like old numbers that hadn't been peeled off. I thought that was actually a nice touch.
I was just really perplexed by it in this film, trying to figure out, are they doing this as a way to say, let's look back at earlier times?
Mm-hmm.
What was the point of doing this if nobody was using these phone numbers anymore, or just people who are set in their ways, perhaps? I don't know. It was just strange to me that actually was something that they used in this film that seems to take place present day. There's nothing in this that says this film takes place in 1960.
Okay, Andy, let's talk about Arthur Hiller, can we?
Good old Arthur Hiller. Yes, we can.
When I talked to you, when I said, this is an Arthur Hiller movie, we should be excited about that. You, I think, said, wait, have we done Arthur Hiller? Yes, we have. We discovered. It was that, though, it was that initial response to a guy who has an encyclopedic understanding of directors and their works, and who is the definition of auteur theory himself.
Hilarion.
Hilarity?
Right, would it be hilarity?
Oh, make a note. That you would, plus he's Canadian, and we just finished our Cronenberg thing, so there's that connection. Like, it feels to me like we should have more of a next real institutional memory of Arthur Hiller, and yet we did not. We have talked about The Hospital, for sure.
Definitely.
Which we liked.
Mm-hmm.
We've got actually, I think don't we have another coming up in our first half of next year?
We do. We're going to be looking at Silver Streak. Silver Streak
on the list. So what do you think of Arthur Hiller as the director here? 75 credits to his name here.
Yeah, he's got some good credits. An interesting mix of films, a variety, and certainly somebody who has not shied away from comedy. I think of the comedy films that he's done. I can look early to like the Out of Towners that he did with Jack Lemmon, which was great. I loved that movie. Or even Love Story, a very kind of very melodramatic heavy romantic drama that was a little much, but I think he handled it well. And looking at stuff later in his career, like shortly after this, Outrageous Fortune, which I loved at the time, See No Evil, Hear No Evil, I also loved at the time. And then stuff like The Babe that he did a few years later. Did I tell you I snuck onto the set for that when they were filming in Chicago?
Not?
I did, actually. It wasn't intentionally sneaking onto the set. I was a young high school kid, and I was wandering, and I was trying to see what was going on. And yes, I did end up on the set of The Babe, a bedroom scene, actually.
Did you, like so many of us?
Me.
Did you find Kelly McGillis?
I did not.
Oh.
I did not. But she's who triggered me for it, so I knew what was going on. I said, Kelly McGillis, they're making a movie right here. One would do that when one sees Kelly McGillis walk by.
Yes. That is absolutely true.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, completely random little direction there.
Right.
Arthur Hiller, yes, I think that he's an interesting guy. I think that he's done a variety of films that don't stand out to me as a guy who I would say he is very much an auteur, because everything that he has done has a very definitive hilarity stamp. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I don't know. I think that he is a pretty straightforward filmmaker and tells his stories with in the way that they need to be told.
My sense is what we saw on screen is what was on the page.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I just get the feeling that he had a very strong sense, and I don't know this, but I feel like I've seen some other movies of his, Author, obviously The Hospital. Like, they all seem like pragmatic approaches to the text. I would be curious to see what those who worked with him say about him and his approach to the work, because it just feels like he's just got a strong muscle to put like just straight stories on the screen. He's a utility sort of director, and I like the movies that he's done. And insofar as this movie tells kind of a wonky story, and I have some challenges with our protagonist, I don't necessarily have a problem with the direction. It's I think he gets the beats, insofar as they're beats that I find funny. He gets them right. I mean, I think he does funny stuff. And The Hospital, that was a riot.
It was definitely a satire for sure. Well, I think that he does have a handle on comedy, and it's just tricky. And I don't know if it's just working with Neil Simon or an adaptation thereof, or if it's just or what it is. But I feel like some of the comedy that he does here hits pretty well, and I feel like the tone is right. But then there is other comedy that I'm like, I don't feel like it was quite as on the ball. Like I felt like the tone was often felt like it should be a lot more absurdist than it was. Like sometimes it felt pretty straight and just not too different. But there's so many things like the Lonely Guy store and the jokes with the dog, and like there's a lot of things that I'm like, I feel like we could have just kept that absurdity up the whole time, and it would have been a much stronger film.
Well, it's interesting. His background was originally in psychology at University of Toronto, and then law at University of British Columbia. He went into communications, got a job at CBC in Toronto, and his start in the film business was directing public affairs programs. Now, if there is any form of media that is more straight from the page than public affairs programming, I don't know what it is. So there are certain muscles that you develop that it maybe take a while to shake loose. And so, I totally get your point. And that's, that may be as a result of the muscles that he's exercising.
That's possible.
And now we've already talked a little bit about the Weinberger, Daniels, Simon conundrum. I do want to talk just briefly about Neil Simon, though. Well, I guess we should talk about all these guys. They all have sort of a storied history in writing. Ed Weinberger, of course, was behind the Mary Tyler Moore Show. So you think this, the story
he and Daniels did Taxi.
Yeah, right. And Taxi. You'd think these New York stories, or these, I guess, New York and Mary Tyler Moore was at Chicago. Anyway, these big city stories, they absolutely have a sense of absurdity that you're talking about that I think we're wanting more from in this movie. Like, these are guys who write about the absurdity of big city living.
And that was a note of mine. I'm like, it feels like there are a lot of in-jokes for people in New York City. I felt like through the whole thing, just so many things were pointed out, and I couldn't help but feel like the writers really lived there to a point where some of these jokes just only those sorts of people are going to get, which I think could potentially hurt the film.
Neil Simon, we have talked about. Have we talked about more than one Neil Simon? Let's see. This is another one. We talked about Murder by Death. Did we talk about The Goodbye Girl?
Nope. I think it's just Murder by Death.
Just Murder by Death.
Yeah.
Which is funny and got some racist stuff going on in there that didn't age as well. However, I think Neil Simon is a genuinely funny writer, and I think he also has a sense of that absurdity. Like, you don't become known for writing television for things like The Odd Couple, without being able to grasp that sense of just over the top absurdity. And so again, credit to the writers for tackling this very maybe strange adaptation.
But but clearly, at least based on kind of what I could find to read from the Lonely Guy's Book of Life, I feel like these three guys were able to pull out elements to actually kind of create a story that, it may not have been as good as it should have been, but it still worked. And I think to that end, they found a way to adapt a book that they brought some stuff to the table. So I got to give them a little credit.
Yeah. No, I think so. This was a challenging piece. The way I understand it, Steve Martin is the one who actually acquired the rights to the book. He was the one who went after this. Did you find anything different?
I didn't find that. So that's interesting.
That is from a lovely review in the Washington Post from Roger Piantadosi. And he says this is, I think, the way he puts it, I think is worth at least reading. Maybe Steve Martin knew his fans were gaining fast on him in the gray hair department. No, let's go back to the jerk. Anyway, or that Wild and Crazy would eventually make the paying customers a little sick and tired. Maybe that's why not too long ago he jumped at the rights to Bruce J. Friedman's quickie book, The Lonely Guy's Guide to Life, seeing a chance to shed the Wild and Crazy act for something more now, more 80s. Something, for instance, you could call Mild and Lonely. Not a bad idea, and The Lonely Guy is an amusingly bleak and fitfully charming result. Fitfully charming.
Fitfully charming.
Yeah. Which I think is, is overall a very positive review, and the reviews tend to be, I think, down the middle for this thing. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that could be just complete editorial. I don't know. That's the only thing I found on getting the thing made.
I couldn't find it. I couldn't find much. This is one of those movies where there's not a lot of stuff that is out there as far as kind of the process of getting it made. So I was curious about some of it. I wasn't sure what was out there. Didn't find much. I did find that Andy Garcia pops up in this film as an uncredited actor, possibly extra somewhere.
Watch The Lonely Guy for Andy Garcia. In the last couple of movies, The Man with Two Brains, I think Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, which had its own challenges. We had some camera and editorial issues, and particularly in The Man with Two Brains. This one, camera Victor J. Kemper, editing Roger Gosnell and William Reynolds. This was workmanlike, practical camera and editing.
It was. Like, nothing stood out to me. When we were in the fog, it just felt like kind of uglyish fog. Nothing felt too great there. The editing worked. I mean, it all worked Nothing stood out though.
Nothing that was jarring.
Nothing that was jarring. Nothing that
movie,
was overly exciting.
Yeah.
The thing that did excite me was Jerry Goldsmith, one of my 10 J's of film composing. I love his music here. Interestingly, like a track came on some other album I have where it's just called The Lonely Guy's Suite. And so I recognized a lot of the themes, but just because I have that one suite of music from this. And I love it. I love the themes from this. This is a great Jerry Goldsmith, as always, does a wonderful job. I
think so too. What was so funny though is that the score seems very 80s. Like it just struck me as super 80s in a way that I enjoy it. Like that's not a critique. It just felt like of a time in a way that some composers don't to me.
Well, and yeah, Goldsmith certainly has some 80s scores that feel very 80s, even if it's not specifically like 80s instruments or 80s kind of that sounds, but they still feel that way. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I do have one, I don't know, we're going to call this a fact, a real-time fact-checking, a correction. Andy, as far as I can tell, the medical community has determined that you cannot have orgasm after orgasm by sneezing.
Speak for yourself.
I got to tell you, I didn't know where you were going to go with that joke or that setup. I didn't know where you were going to go. You didn't let me down, Andy. You did not let me down. Speak for yourself.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we need to put that on a shirt. Intern, get on that. What did you find? You wanted to share something.
No, I didn't actually about that. I assumed you were going somewhere else. I had a note that wasn't about that, but I appreciate you bringing that up anyway.
Good. No, let's pivot. Yeah, please. Get me out of this.
Switch. I didn't know this, but Steve Martin is an actual runner in real life. And for the running scene that we have toward the end of the film, as he's running all over the city because the traffic is all tied up, he actually runs across the 59th Street Bridge over to Queens. And it was all filmed on location. He starts on the Manhattan side of the bridge, runs mid-lane to the Queensboro Plaza, branches out toward Astoria. He runs under the L. Up 31st Street, ends up with the cop who, at the corner of 31st and Newton Avenue, goes up to 28th Avenue and 31st. And all of this, they did shoot it out of sequence a little bit, but he does all of the running himself, which I think is fantastic.
That's a funny bit.
Breaking into the wrong wedding and having a great moment there.
Also a funny bit. I wonder how hard it was to actually shoot that for Steve Martin at that point in his career.
I would imagine it was difficult, but it's not like New York. It's not like the first time they've closed their streets down for movies.
Exactly. Okay, how to do at the box office? What'd you find?
Well, unfortunately, I could not find any information for the budget of Hiller's first film with Martin. The only thing I did find relating to the budget was that the film was a bomb at the box office, which tells me the earnings came in far under what it cost to make. The movie did open January 27th, 1984, opposite Woody Allen's Broadway Danny Rose and Gregory Nava's El Norte, plus the genre film Slayground. Even with a January window, the movie could not crack the top 5 for the weekend and ended up only making $5.7 million at the box office, or $14 million in today's dollars. Without the budget, I can't figure out what the profits were, so we will just have to take people's word for it that it was a flop.
Well, that's unfortunate, mostly for your spreadsheet, which I know does not suffer holes easily.
No, but at least it will not be sitting lonely because it's not the only one to have suffered that fate.
Yeah. Well, it was a tough rewatch for me. It was a movie that I wanted to stand up to my memory, but my memory, I'm getting used to it not being a great servant in terms of Steve Martin movies. And so, insofar as I think this had a lot of potential, I was rooting for it, struggled with our protagonist character, but overall it's got some funny jokes and some stuff that was dated and didn't land all that well.
Yeah, it was one that I enjoyed. I didn't love. I think it's one that I find enjoyment in because there are parts that worked really well. I think as the sum, I struggle a little more with it.
Well, I think on that, Andy, let's take it to Flickchart.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com / the next reel, and you can see all the movies that we've talked about on this very show. If you sign up for your own account, you can swipe over in your show notes, tap the word flickchart. It'll take you straight to this movie where you can add it to your own catalog and see how it stands up to ours.
First up, The Lonely Guy or Scanners. 100% Scanners.
Yeah, Scanners.
Man, did you remember me telling you I love that movie?
I do remember that. I struggle with it, but it's still, I would put it on first.
All right. The Lonely Guy or more Cronenberg, Rabid.
Rabid.
I'll take The Lonely Guy.
You will?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. You what the hey who, Andy? Let's take it to the mat. Here we go.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Paper.
Scissors. Sorry.
Man, if there is ever a time to get a 2001 re-rank, it's now, because I am in the hole.
You are. Yep, you are failing. All right, The Lonely Guy or Princess Mononoke.
Princess Mononoke.
Princess Mononoke. The Lonely Guy or the Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. The Lonely Guy or Compulsion.
Compulsion.
Compulsion, indeed. The Lonely Guy or The Host.
The Host. All about the host. You won't.
I will say
You'll
the
say
host,
The Lonely
yeah.
Guy. Of course.
I will say the
Lonely Guy. Try it again.
The Lonely Guy or Christmas in July.
Guy. Yes. Christmas in July.
Christmas in July. The Lonely Guy or another Steve Martin movie, The Jerk. Ooh.
The Jerk.
I will say The Lonely Guy.
Okay, you can have it.
Wow. Okay, that's easy. No arm twisting here. The Lonely Guy or La Femme Nikita.
La Femme Nikita.
I will say La Femme Nikita. She was also a little lonely. All right, well, that puts The Lonely Guy in spot 321 on our chart. 321 out of 430 puts it at about 25%.
25%. All right. So when I started out, this was at 244 on my flick chart. Where did it land on yours?
It landed in 3690 out of 4254, about a 13%.
Okay, so we ended
pretty low, considering I enjoyed it still.
Yeah, we ended in about the right place, which was, for me, 1274 out of 1419, which was a 10%. So if I were to go by the algorithm for letterboxd.com/the next reel, this should be a half-star movie, according to the star ranking at Flickchart. That seems a little low for me. It really is a middle of the road movie, I think, after our conversation. And so out of 5 stars, I'm going to go with 2.5.
2.5 stars. Is there a heart?
I feel like there should be a heart for this. Yeah. I'm going to give it a heart for Charles Grodin.
Considering it's at a 13% for me, it still ended up at a 3 and a heart for me. Okay. 3 out of 5. And I think it's just, there were like some jokes that really clicked for me and some relationships that I really enjoyed, even if the film did have a lot of things that it was just fighting against me on. So
where do we go from here, Andy?
We are going to be wrapping up our Steve Martin series with his 4th and final collaboration with Carl Reiner, All of Me, which also comes out in 1984. It's going to be a Steve Martin, Lily Tomlin comedy. It'll be a nice way to wrap up this series.
Memory's pretty strong about this, All of Me, Andy.
Me too.
Okay, well.
I'm looking forward to revisiting it and chatting about it next week.
I'm really nervous.
When the movie ends.
Our conversation begins. Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always do.
Oh, Amazon! You try so hard, and sometimes you nail it, and sometimes you struggle, and you need to try again. Where would you like to start?
Well, I've got a 1 star, because I went low.
Yeah,
a 1 star by Hirsch.
Old
Hirsch. Hirsch says, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Let's see. We had difficulty with the link. Movie reloads several times. We need to retry. We needed to reorder it on Saturday. There you go.
Oh, on Saturday. Oh, dear.
That's why.
Oh, Saturday is a better day for Amazon. Well,
That's
I
when
have
you
one
need to reorder.
from Non-Smoker that dropped way back in 2008, who says, this is pathetic. This is absolutely the worst movie for Steve Martin and Charles Grodin. I bought it reading other reviews thinking Charles Grodin would be awesome, but to my surprise, this is one of the worst movies ever made. You may smile at one point, but beyond that, not worth a penny. Watching a wall is more entertaining. This whole bit we've got going may have a very short life, but I'm still laughing today. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amazon. You're delightful. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We are highlighting adaptations from Season 9 over at our Originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. That's the site where listeners can purchase the source material for all of our adapted film discussions.
We had a big Robin Hood series this season, looking at 9 different versions on screen. Many were likely adapted from Howard Pyle's The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, including Douglas Fairbanks in Robin Hood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, and the 1991 Robin Hood, and Ridley Scott's Robin Hood.
Robin and Marian was specifically based on the ballad The Jest of Robin Hood.
And we really don't have too much to say about Robin and the Seven Hoods.
We talked Dead Ringers for our David Cronenberg series adapted from Barry Wood and Jack Geislin's novel Twins.
Have you checked out that show?
You know, I haven't, but I've heard great things.
2 comedies from our Steve Martin series were adaptations, Pennies from Heaven from the BBC series, and The Lonely Guy from the book by Bruce J. Friedman.
The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas was part of our Colin Higgins series, adapted from the Broadway musical.
Spike Lee brought us Black Klansman from Ron Stallworth's memoir.
And we looked at a trio of John le Carre adaptations, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, The Little Drummer Girl, and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Plus, all 3 movies in our Agnieszka Holland series were based on books, Europa, In Darkness, and Spore.
La Cage aux Folles and its remake The Birdcage both came from Jean Poiret's original play.
We also talked about Arsenic and Old Lace and Charade in our Cary Grant series.
All of these were based on other material, and it is all available on our Originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. Every book purchased supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations we've covered and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.